don't know if maybe I'm not plugged in. There we go. So the concept of Gideon Rescue Company is to bring practical skills in the disaster zone, whether it be bringing a whole church together in the disaster zone and raking up leaves, or raking up branches out of people's yards, cutting trees out of people's yard, or tarping a roof, but using these skills as a wedge to reach them. So we have, as Gideon Rescue Company, we have some dogs, search and rescue dogs. We have some boats that we use. We have different skills. We have paramedics. We have a couple nurses that come with us now and again. And we still use the dogs, like in Texas. When we went to Texas, everybody wanted the dogs there for the purpose of looking for people. And we jumped on that opportunity to bring the dogs in, use them to get in, but that's not the only reason we're there. Right? The main reason is, how can we bring the gospel? And we're bold with it. We tell them this is exactly what we're here to do. We're here for this to see, but we also see that the world is falling apart. We also see that people are looking for hope, and they need hope. And we can give context as Christians to why these things are happening. And everywhere we've gone, all of the emergency operations centers, the sheriffs, the military commanders, the senators, they all look at us and say, wow, nobody's ever thought about this before. Nobody's said anything like this to us. We'd like to work with you. And God gives us the resources like we've never had, only if we are faithful with the message that he's given us to proclaim. And we've learned that if we really don't have a lot to offer. We as a people, like as me, I don't have a lot to offer to a huge government organization, right? Except what Christ has done for me and the message that he's given us. And when we offer that, we don't have much skills, we don't have many tools, we don't have much of that. God gives us all the resources we need, and he has given us the whole towns where the mayor and the Baptist preacher of that whole town come to us and say, we've seen you guys hand out these books. We'd like you to leave us with as many of these great controversies as you can. We want every single person in our town to get one. And it wasn't because we were there handing out books. It's because we invested effort into people. We were singing at people's doors. We were praying with people in the street. We were helping people in their lawn. Didn't matter how big the task was or how small that it was. We did it happily. And the mayor and the pastor saw all this. And the whole town came for a prayer meeting. We had a whole Bible study with the Ouachita Hills Academy. And Ouachita Hills came and participated, and it was amazing. We've actually worked with them quite often. They come with us, and I don't know if you've heard their music program. It's pretty good. And they come and they bring their music into the disaster zone, and it just blows open doors. So that's what we're going to talk about. What is our tactical advantage as Seventh-day Adventists? It's our message and every aspect that goes with it, right? And you may be asking yourself, well, how can I really be a part of this? I'm just a teacher or an auto mechanic. Or for me, I was just an arborist. Like the God that when growing up, I would read these stories in the Bible and be like, wow, I would love to see God work like that. turning water into wine, or parting the Red Sea, or all of these things. But what we don't realize, and so many of us, the God of the past and the God of the future is going to do great and wonderful things, right? But the God of the present is the same God and can do just as amazing things right now. And that's what we seem to always forget, at least for me. And when I talk to people, it's like, well, it's the same God. What's different is how are we receptive to that? Or are we polluted by the things of this world? Are our minds clear? Are we distracted? So, I just like to look at the example in Matthew 4, where Jesus calls some of his disciples. Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. When you think about this, he used language that they understood. He didn't say, "Come follow me, and I'm going to make you a martyr who's going to be crucified upside down." Right? He didn't say that. He didn't say, "Follow me, and I'm going to make you an evangelist." He said, "I'm going to make you a fisher of men." And they're like, "Well, that sounds kind of cool. I've been fishing my whole life. I'd like to do something more." So he called someone who's working an ordinary, simple job to ministry and told him how he can still use the things that he knew, like fishing, for the glory of God. And Jesus showed him how to use his skills for eternal things, not just for selfish gain. The same skills, now we're just going to pivot it from self to others. And therefore, it's going to replicate. There was only one qualification that Jesus asked of his disciples. What was the qualification that Jesus required of his disciples? Jesus asked Peter a very simple question of vital importance. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Tend my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. Well, then feed my lambs. Right? So one interesting thing when we see the Great Commission, almost every gospel has the Great Commission, except one. And it's the one where I'm drawing a blank of Peter, do you love me? It's the only one that doesn't really have the gospel commission. Go into all the world, except this one. And this one is you have to have a personal relationship with God. Right? Do you love me? If you do, then feed my lambs. Right? The others, go into all the world. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Go and do this, go and do this, go and do this. And then he's like, you have to have this personal relationship with me as well. You have to love me. Do you love me? Right? You think about it, after all this happened and after they received the early rain, where did Peter and Paul, the greatest evangelists of all time, where did they end up? Both of them ended up in Rome. It's like the most absolute heart of everything. Like the most dangerous place they could all go was Rome. And yet, that's where they ended up. What is the Rome of today? There's so many. The 1040 window. America. You look at it, it's really difficult to try to reach Protestants of today because they're so complacent with what they have and the things of this world, and they're happy with their evangelical mindset of, well, I can be saved in sin. That's not true, right? So how do we bring this to them? How do we go to Rome, right? This is the principles that we as Gideon Rescue Company try to operate on. These are the requirements. If people say, how do we join your group? We want to help. We want to do this. We've taken all kinds of people as volunteers. We went to Turkey with an atheist. We went to Turkey with a Muslim. We've taken all these people, and The atheist has now given his life to Jesus. The Muslim is now giving his life to Jesus. You know, what people really truly need to see is a demonstration. We can hear all that we need to hear. I can stand up here and talk about it, and I'm not going to convince anybody. But if you see something, you see a change in somebody, that's where the change can come from in you. Right? Do you love Jesus? Can you be bold? Do you have the truth? Can you present the truth? Can you listen to the Holy Spirit? That's one of the biggest ones we struggle with a lot of times. Even still, we learn on every response. We're like, oh, there's a medical call, or there's somebody, we want to go do this. We want to chase after the high adrenaline, the fun stuff. And the Holy Spirit's like, no, I'm going to lock you guys in a shelter with 3,000 people in a school that's only supposed to hold 700 people for a hurricane. Well, everybody else gets to do the fun stuff out in the hurricane. We're going to lock you in the shelter. Right? But how do we leverage that? Now, we are put in charge of going room to room and asking what people need. What better job could an Adventist have? Go into a room with 3,000 people, different rooms, checking on people, talking with people, praying with people, giving literature, seeing what people need. And by the whole end of the trip, the whole building is like, God is here. We even had there was only 3 of us, and we were all dressed the identical, big blue uniforms with patches and big letters on the back that say GRC, Gideon Rescue Company. After this, there's this lady, because we were helping older people to the bathroom all night long, distributing food and all these things. And the leader comes up and she says, I would really like to thank all 4 of you for being here today. You have changed lives. And I looked at Brock and I said, she said 4. And he's like, no. I was like, yeah. We're like, there's only 3 of us. And she's like, what? No, there's been 4 of you all night long going through these rooms. There was only 3 of us in blue uniforms. Right? God is working. Right? And he can do any of this through any of us. It's easy, it's simple, right? Do you have a desire to reach people? Are you willing to do the humble tasks like being locked in a shelter? Or we were in Los Angeles for the big mudslides, and we didn't even have a shovel. Right? How do you work in 6 feet of mud without a shovel? And I found a 2x4, and I just started scraping the sidewalk. And it turned out that the mayor and everybody else happened to be doing something there, and they came up and said, what are you doing? Well, I didn't even know who I was talking to. But we just told them, hey, we're here to help. Well, do you want something else to do? Well, yeah. Do you have a shovel? No. Well, I'll get you a shovel. By the end of the day, we had 3 skid steers. We had a whole construction crew, and we were working the most hard-hit mudslide area in the whole place. And there was the president of Paramount Pictures, Taylor Swift, and Justin Bieber. All of it right there. And then the mayor comes up, and we're talking, and it's like, hey, we have a book for you. Boom, 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 boom. All because we just started scraping the sidewalk. We didn't know what to do. Right? Will we do the humble tasks? Because if we're faithful in the little things, God will give us greater things. If he can see that, yes, this person is here not for the glory of themselves, but for the glory of God, and they're willing to do this, the simple thing, I can trust them that I can get the glory for the greater thing. Right? Would you use your skills to reach souls? That's the question that we should all be asking. We all have skills. We all have plans. We all have talents. But will we invest those talents in others? That's what I love about Matthew 25, the parable of the talents. We have to invest the talents. We have to use our skills as a leverage to bring the gospel. And it's really simple. If you can show up and have a Christ-centered heart and smile, man, it just lights up people's faces. All right, this was in Africa. We went with my whole family, and we just did a medical missionary clinic and evangelistic series. And it was amazing. Life-changing. Not only for the people there, but for us. For my kids, they still talk about Africa, and they just want to go back to Africa. Can you comfort the brokenhearted? We were in Turkey for the earthquake. 250,000 people died in 3 minutes. It was devastating. And we're there with our dogs, and we're searching, and we're pulling bodies out left and right, and we're pulling people out, and we're just like, there's so much. And I just remember sitting next to this one lady, and she's just sitting there just rocking and just sobbing. Her whole family's been killed. They're in bags next to her. And it's like, well, what do you say? What do you say to that? I don't have the words for this. But you can put your arm around her, and you can just pray. You can talk with her and cry with her. And I'm telling you, just by being there, it's a huge thing. So if there's a tornado, even if you just show up. We went to Hot Springs Village, Arkansas last year for the tornadoes. And I'm still in contact with the fire department. They keep praying for us and asking, when can we come back and do a training with them? When can we come back and do some Bible studies with them? Hot Springs Village Fire Department. And that whole village, the Hot Springs Village, Ouachita Hills came, and it was amazing. All we did was just show up. We didn't even know what we were going to do. And pretty soon the fire department gave us control of everything. We had control of everything as Adventists to leverage the gospel. Right? Anybody can do this. You can play with children. Anybody can play with children. We played soccer for hours and hours in Turkey in the Syrian refugee camps. Blow up balloons for the kids. You'd never know it, but this guy, him and his daughter are the only of his family that's left after that earthquake. But you look at him, and he's so happy and he's so smiling. I didn't know. All I had was a balloon. It's easy. The point I'm trying to get across is, if we can have compassion and love and follow the principles of Isaiah 58, 1 Corinthians 13, we can finish this. This is in Israel, just talking with people, showing that you care. Can you pray with people? I can't even begin to tell you the power of prayer. This family, this was in Hot Springs Village, and out of their whole neighborhood, their house was the only one damaged. But they wouldn't accept any help. Every time we went, they said no. They said no. They said no. Finally, after 4 days of trying, they agreed. And it turned out that they were atheists. They wanted nothing to do with it, with anything. And by the end, all we did was help them move all their stuff out of their house. We offered to pray with them, and they just broke down crying. They said, we've never seen anything like this. And we just prayed with them. We didn't really know much. When we left the house, their neighbor came up, and they said, we have been praying for those people for so long. They have been struggling. They don't believe in God. They're mean, and they don't want any help from anybody. And she says, but we have been praying. And then she just burst into tears. She said, I'm just so devastated that you guys are the ones that did this. I have lived here for 10 years, and I never once went over there to try to reach them. Right? And she's like, I should have. And that's the whole, it's, now she recognized that, man, there's opportunity. If we as a church could just look at our neighbors, how many of us know our neighbors? How many of us really know our neighbors? How many of us care what our neighbors are doing? Do we want to see them in heaven? If we do, let's do everything we can. We've prayed for all kinds of things. We've prayed for Black Hawk helicopters that have come. We've been in Turkey and prayed for a solar or a thermal camera, and it's come. We've prayed for countless things, and it has happened. And sometimes it's not exactly how we thought, but we have not because we ask not, and we ask according to our own pleasure. Right? I've asked for things, and I don't get them. But let's ask for the things that give God glory. This woman in Turkey, she had fallen during the earthquake and broken her hip. She was 85 years old, and had been laying in bed for almost a month, hadn't got up, hadn't moved. And we were there in the Syrian refugee camp, and we don't really have any medical anything, but we were called doctors. They called us doctors. Doctors, please come, please come. And they brought us into this tent, and we looked at her, and we were just like, oh no, like, I don't know what to do. Like, we explained to them about hot and cold, explained to them, like, well, we need to get her in the sun, like, just, like, love on her, touch her, help her feel that she's still there, And they all agreed, and we just said, do you mind if we say a prayer? And she said, yes, let's pray. So we prayed. And Corey, my cousin, he put his hand on her and he said, I would love to see you walk again someday. And it went from English to Turkish, Turkish to Arabic, that Arabic dialect to her Arabic dialect. And then she starts to try to stand up. And she stood up, and I looked at Corey and I said, we got to make her sit down. This isn't good. And he's like, well, I don't know what to do. And then she just starts walking, and she put her hand on us, and she walked out of the tent with us. And the whole village was now crowded around, or the whole tent village was crowded around. And they just start cheering and crying and shouting. And they bring a chair, and they sit her down in this chair. And the interpreter was just like laughing and crying. And I said, what are they saying? What are they saying? And she's like, they're asking what you did. And I said, what did you tell them? She said, I told them that you prayed to Jesus. And the whole village crowded around, and the old woman, she asked again if we would pray to Jesus. And we prayed again. And that whole village, and we actually found out later that she's walking around like nothing ever happened. And it's not any credit to any of us. It's just, would God leverage the opportunity? Would we use that opportunity and ask to give him greater glory? And he's right there. We have all of heaven right there. Right? This has happened multiple times, this trip into Turkey, where we prayed for someone, and after we leave or something, and all of a sudden an ambulance comes and picks them up, and they're like, there's no way an ambulance could have got here. The roads are closed. We can't even get a vehicle or a helicopter in. But yet, God sent an ambulance. Can we sing? When we were in LA for the fires, we just went to the Red Cross shelter. We actually got kicked out of the Red Cross shelter, told we couldn't sing religious songs by the chaplain of the Red Cross. Right? We got kicked out, so we stood on the street corner right there by the shelter and sang. We sang for 6 nights, every night out there. And on the 7th night, the chaplain came out and said, you know what? I really appreciate what you're doing, and you've uplifted the spirits in here. I'd like you to come in and do it in here. The 7th night. What other Bible story is there something that happens 6 times, and on the 7th time, the walls come down? Right? When we live these Bible stories over and over again, and it's like, wow, it's the same God, the same opportunity, the same thing, right? This woman, our very first night after we got kicked out, we were out there playing and singing songs. She had actually lost her 3-year-old daughter in the fire, and she just was sobbing, didn't know what to do. And we just talked with her and prayed with her, and she's coming. She goes to the Pasadena Seventh-day Adventist Church now. Just because we happened to be at one spot at one particular time and she was passing by. Right? We don't know. We have no idea what is happening out there. All we have is the message that we have to share. If we do it and we are faithful with it, God brings the people to us. Right? In every walk in life. Same with Ukraine. This is Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. That's all at Ouachita Hills Academy. We sung. This one, again, another guy did not want any help. But once we finally were able to help him, we sang some songs for him, and he just broke down in tears. It's rare that when we sing in the disaster zone, that people don't cry. Everybody cries. It opens the heart. We use music in every situation. It's this one. We have this hope that I don't know why it's, but we sing that song everywhere we go. We have this hope. This one, this was in Decatur, or not, in Diaz, Arkansas, just this spring for the big tornado that hit. This was that Diaz, Arkansas, the whole village, like we were given that whole town, like when it was just so crazy. But this is in the Baptist church. They asked if we could do a prayer meeting, and we invited the whole town. There was standing room only. The people in the back there was people all lined out outside, and the windows were shaking. You know, and music is a weapon if we'll use it, and we've seen it done over and over again. This is Puerto Rico. We brought in Castle Valley Academy. We brought them in, they came, and they just played music in a little tent right out by the point of distribution. You know, this is in the battlefield in Ukraine. We were riding in an ambulance, and I never thought that I would ever use this song again, but I learned it in Sabbath school when I was little, and then God opened the door, and it's like, I'll never sing this song again the same. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly over the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Our driver was actually like, can you please sing that again? I'd like to get it recorded. And he was like like, I don't know what you'd call him. He was like that's the thing. In these places, it draws the crowd that are not the greatest crowd, right? These guys that are just there to hunt people, really what they're there for, you know? And it's really sad. But he was like a white supremacist nationalist group that was there. And they were just there to kill communists, is what he said. And it's like, oh, like how do we reach this guy, you know? So we just preached to him, and he drove us. We had to drive out of the battlefield in his back of his ambulance, and we just sung songs. And he's like, this is awesome, you know? Like he actually asked us. He's like, do you think you could give me that book that you've been giving out? It's like, yes, absolutely, you know. We actually met a Satanist. We tried to give him a book or a God poem. He said, no, I worship Satan. And we were like, whoa. And we just like stopped all operations, and we're like, we need to talk. And we talked to him for 20 minutes. And at the end, he was crying and asking, and we asked if we could pray with him. And he said yes. And he took off his little Satanist patch, and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. Here, you know? And it's like, how many of us, and honestly, if it had just been me there, I probably would have been like, okay, and walked away, right? But when you go with a partner that's of equal mindset, and you can work together, and he happened to connect with this guy right off the bat and was like, no, we got to talk to him. You know, be persistent. You know, it doesn't matter if they say no, ask again. Ask again. We've been turned down so many times, and on the seventh time, like the Red Cross shelter, right? With this guy, you know, ask again and again, be persistent. We'll set up literature stations all over, you know. Literature is a huge one. If she can hand out literature, you can hand out literature. It's easy. Even if she doesn't even talk, she just hands it to him, you know. This is in LA for the mudslides. We actually flagged down this mailman. He just was happy and he was smiling, and I just flagged him out and said, I have a gift for you. And I gave it to him. He said, nobody's ever given me a gift like this. He said, I got to get a picture with you. And we got a picture. And he was so excited. When we have a uniform like this, even down here in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, I stepped out of try to cross the street, and cars were stopping and asking for directions. Is the road open? And I'd be like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it is. And here's this. And I'd give them something. And then the next car saw it. So then they stopped. And they were like, do we need to know anything? Well, I think the road is open down there, but you should be good. Also, this is for you. I did it for 20 minutes. I just stood there. You know, the same thing happened in Los Angeles. I tried to cross the street, and there was like police cars down there, and cars were trying to come through, and they'd pull in thinking I could answer their question, and I'd give them a glow track. And then the next car, oh, they gave them something. They must be giving them something, right? And it works. I promise you, like if you can come up with any type of uniform, like your church is like, you know what, we're going to do this, we need a uniform. It doesn't matter, as long as it looks somewhat official, it works, right? It draws people. I've already showed that video. This woman, and this was really cool. I went to Israel. On my way out, I handed a glow track to her on the airplane, a flight attendant. I left. 4 months later, I was coming back from Los Angeles, and I was riding on a plane, and I saw her. And I was like, oh, I'm going to give her a great controversy this time. And she sat down, and she opened a book, and she started reading. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I wonder what she's reading. So I took a picture, and I zoomed in, and she's reading the Great Controversy. And I was like, okay, I have to ask her about this. So she came by, and she kept looking at me funny. So I flagged her down, and I said, I don't know if you remember me. She's like, oh, I thought you didn't remember me. She's like, do you remember you gave me that tract like 6 months ago? And I was like, yes. She's like, it was amazing. And I said, well, where did you get this book? She's like, well, when I got to the airport, I was showing and sharing it with all of my friends and my colleagues, and a pilot walked by, and he said, where did you get that? And she told him, and he said, I have a book for you. And he gave her the Great Controversy. Right? So even if we don't even see the results, all we can do is plant a seed. We never know what can happen. You know? And I've actually seen her again, and she's finished the book, and she's all excited about it. So it's amazing, right? If we can just be faithful with planting seeds or watering seeds, you know, God will reap the harvest. This is what we did during COVID. We just went hospital room to hospital room, just seeing if we could help, seeing if we could pray with people and read. You know, we can all do this. All of this stuff is very simple that each one of us could do. This is in Israel, just again, handing out literature. This is in LA after the fires. They had checkpoints set up, and we just went with food, healthy food, to the checkpoint, people that were watching the checkpoints, and we would say, hey, do you guys want anything, want some healthy food? And they're like, oh, all we've had is energy drinks and candy bars for 4 days. And it's like, well, we have fresh Mediterranean falafel. And they're like, whoa, we'll have it. And we say, we also have these books. And we handed out so many, like we emptied the food truck, like 200 meals a day going to these checkpoints. We were running, all we did, just run meals. And we would get to the point where a whole new crew would come in, and we'd show up with meals, and the guys would be like, oh no, we just ate. But we saw our buddies have this book. Do you guys have this book? We're like, yeah, here's the book, right? We even get to this one checkpoint, they weren't allowing anybody, even homeowners, in. And we showed up, there was the commander and the LA County like fire jail team, like it's like the inmates. And it was the chaplain and the colonel and all that. And they were all there talking. We get out, we say, hey, we'd like to give everybody a book. We don't have any more meals. And they said, yeah, the chaplain, let me see the book. She looks at it. She's like, Ellen White. And she looks at it, and she's like, this is a good book. Let's pass it out. So we passed it out to everybody. The commander gave us permission. He took a book. All of the California inmate fire people all got a book. The sheriff got a book, right? And then they said, well, we're not technically supposed to let anybody in, but there's a whole group of guys, soldiers back there that are guarding this one spot. Would you be willing to drive in there and give them books? We're like, yeah, we'll drive in and give them books. So we drove in and gave them books, right? God will remove every stop if we are faithful with his message. And sometimes it seems totally, why would I even try this? It doesn't even seem normal, right? It's not going to work. But try it. Test the armor and see. We got locked in a deportation cell in Lebanon one time. And instead of being discouraged for 18 hours in a deportation cell, in my backpack, I carry about 10 great controversies in different languages. Right? So we're sitting in there with all these other people, and we start talking. Well, where are you from? I'm from France. Well, I have a book for you. This guy, we talked for 2 hours. He was there for like 2 hours or 4 hours, and for 2 hours, we sat there and had a Bible study and talked about the great controversy. And he was taking pictures of this, and he's like, my daughter is wanting to be a nun. And he's sending her pictures of the pages. He's reading a page and send a picture to her. And he's like, I think I've convinced her not to be a nun. Right? Like, and even our jailer, after I handed out every single book we brought in that deportation cell. And then our jailer, he comes up and he's like, I've seen you hand out these books. What is this book? So I presented it. I told him exactly what it is. And he said, this will answer all these questions? It talks about the future? I said, absolutely. He said, do you have one for me? I said, I have one in Arabic. And he's like, can you write in it for me? So I wrote in it, and he said, thank you. And he put me back in my cell, and he sat there all night, and I just watched him just read. Boom. Right? Will we leverage every circumstance that we are in, whether we're sick with cancer in the hospital, or whether we're in a prison cell? Will we leverage that opportunity for souls? That's what God is asking of us. Will we do it? Right? It's easy to do it now, and that's how we create a character that can do it then. Right? This is the Adventist we met after we got attacked by the drone, our last trip to Ukraine. This was the Adventist. He was so excited we were there, but he wouldn't leave the tree. He said we have to stay under the tree because of the drones. Right? Anybody can distribute food. Right? Let's see here. One thing we've noticed is the world is really good at distributing food and water and shelter. All the government agencies do that. Even our own ADRA does that. But the thing that we're missing, and people recognize it, is we're missing the spiritual side of it. We have to give meat in due season. We have to give the spiritual food with it. And that's what's different. That's when we go to places like this in Turkey and we have a medical clinic, we're implementing every opportunity for the gospel. How can we pray with this person? What gives us, how can we reach them? Well, can we give their contact to somebody else? We actually make a log. So that's one thing. If you guys do this, make a log of all the contacts that you make and then turn it over to the local Adventist church. Right? This was in Turkey. This was one thing we prayed for. We actually were doing on Union Island. We were lots of people were stepping on nails and getting their feet infected and all kinds of stuff, and it was really bad. And we're like, well, we don't have any antibiotics. We're like, well, we're going to pack their feet with charcoal, and then we're going to do hot and cold. And we're like, we're going to do it. And we go there, and the lady's like, you can't get cold water on the island even when there is electricity. We said, well, let's pray about it. We prayed, and that afternoon we went down to the docks to get some supplies, and there was a ship that pulled up, and the guy was like, do you know anybody that needs some ice? And we were like, yeah, how much do you have? He's like, son, you couldn't use all the ice if you tried. I'm just going to sit here for 30 days and make ice, and I've got another ship that's coming after me to make ice. We were like, wow. He's like, yep, we left 3 days ago from Venezuela. It's like we prayed this morning for ice, and God had already had it coming 3 days prior. Right? And when we just loaded, we pulled in trucks, we just shoveled ice into every container we could find and drove around the island, and the whole island, within 20 minutes, knew that these Americans had prayed for ice, and God sent the ice. And when we carried the bucket of ice into this woman's house to do hot and cold on her baby and on her foot, she just burst into tears. Or she said, this is impossible. But it's not, because we have God on our side. And that's what, when we show this, now they recognize that I can call on the name of the Lord because I've seen the hand of the Lord. I would have lost heart unless I had seen the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Right? Can you drag brush of any size? If they can do it, you can do it. Anybody can do it. Right? Can you clean out a nasty water tank in the bottom of a hospital? It's a really nasty, lowly job, but it can be done. And the Water Society came and they said, we've never seen anybody that volunteered to do this. And now that you've done this, we'd like to give you control of all the water situation. And now, as Adventists, we had control of the whole watership. And we could say, hey, here's how we do it, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to pray, and we're going to incorporate the gospel into it. Right? We can use a shovel. Even though we didn't need a shovel, we had some skid steers. This is in LA. This is the president of Paramount Pictures, his house. Just a pair of sunglasses can reach someone's heart. Yeah. Or can you use Google Translate? You know, we had a whole shipment of medical supplies come into the doctor on Union Island who'd been working for 90 plus hours straight. And he said, I can't read these. These are all in French. And we sat there all day and just Google translated all the medications, got it all lined up, and said, doctor, here's all your stuff. Turned out that that doctor was an ex-Adventist. And he's like, I've never seen anything like this. Right? That whole trip, everybody we met seemed to be ex-Adventists. The Samaritan's Purse, the guy that came in charge of it all, he's like, well, it seems like the Adventist church is in, and they usually don't work with us. The Adventist church is in the most unique position to operate this thing. And he said, my parents are actually Seventh-day Adventists. And he's like, I'd like to work with you guys. It's the first time ever that that Samaritan's Purse has worked with us as Adventists. You know, that same trip. Can we prune tomatoes? You know, I was working at Castle Valley Academy, or Daystar Academy, and my job all summer for 4 years was pruning tomatoes. And it was the most miserable thing. I hated it. I complained. I did a halfway job. I did a horrible job. I'm certain of it. And I said, I will never prune tomatoes ever again. And then I learned we don't say that, because God was cultivating a character and a skill in me that I wish that I had actually used to the full potential. Because when we were in Israel, right along Gaza, we met a farmer who said, please, Hamas came in and they killed all of my workers, all 40 of my workers from Thailand. He said, I'm the only one here. My tomatoes are dropping off their plants. I have to prune it, and I can't do it by myself. And we said, well, I mean, we can prune tomatoes. And then he's like, will you help me pick tomatoes? And we go in there, and he's like, well, actually, I think I just need it pruned. Do either of you know how to prune tomatoes? And my heart just sank. And I was like, man, why did I complain? What if I hadn't complained? Could I have been more efficient? Could I have done more? Right? And this taught in me that no matter who you are, no matter what skill you have, even if it's the most miserable job that you're doing, God is teaching you and using that to give him glory in the future. Right? We have to do it. We actually were in there pruning tomatoes, and the Iron Dome was shooting missiles out of the sky right above us. That's the Iron Dome. That's the Iron Dome. Right above us.
We have like a greenhouse dome, Brett.
It might.
It might.
Yeah. You can't really hear it. But it was just like boom, boom. There's another one. Same thing, picking oranges. And when we went to this guy after, there was like 50 rows of these tomatoes. In a full day of pruning, we only made it down 4 rows. And we just went to him and we said, we're so sorry. We could only do this many. And he just broke down in tears, and he said, for you to come all the way from America just to prune my tomatoes, he said, I can't even get my neighbors to come help me. He said, I've never seen anything like this before. And he said, I want to know what you believe. He said, because I see something in you that I don't see in my Jewish friends. And we presented. And he said, thank you so much. Do you have any more stuff that I could give to my family? You know, people need to see a demonstration. They need to see for themselves that there's more to religion than just theoretical knowledge. That Adventism in its true sense is service to others. And if they see that presented with truth, man, they just grab onto it and run. And they'll be the greatest missionaries the world has ever seen. Right? And we've seen this time and again. Our goal is to activate churches and schools and young people and Pathfinder groups to attack the mission fields of today, which are disaster zones. They're increasing. It's the highest in 10 years. You know, it's the highest the world has ever seen in the last 10 years. It's easy. Can you give haircuts? You know, this is in Turkey. We were just giving haircut after haircut. All the kids thought it was great. They didn't realize it was for the lice. It was really bad. But it was so great just to be able to sit there, and these were our Muslim friends that were like, well, we can do haircuts. And we were like, well, I don't know if that's the best thing. Oh no, we want to do haircuts. We're like, okay, let's do haircuts. And it was a hit. Everybody came. Right? Sometimes the simplest thing, like flowers or haircuts, the simplest thing. Running a chainsaw. You know, many of us can run chainsaws. Clearing debris. Clearing people's yards. And the key of all of this is not to get sucked into the work. Because the devil, first of all, he tries to prevent you from going on something like this. And then he's like, okay, if they're going to go, I'm going to swamp them with work so they're running a chainsaw all day and don't get to talk to the homeowner. So the key of all of this is to invest just enough equity into the physical work to open the heart, to reach them, to talk with them, to share with them, and then go to the next house. Right? To show that you care, that you can be a blessing, and then activate them to go help their neighbor. And then pretty soon they're just like, forget my stuff, let's go, I'll go with you. Can I come with you? And we're going to go to the neighbor's house. They need help. Pretty soon we have the whole neighborhood moving through with us. Can you give massages? All right, this was in Israel. They, the local church, the Adventist church there, they had a spa day for all of the IDF soldiers to come, and they cooked them amazing plant-based food, and they did a whole massage thing, and they gave them all steps to Christ. Right? This is how we do it. What if we did this for our own county? What if we did this for the National Guard? What if you came in after a disaster and said, hey, all the firefighters, we want to have you come to our church, and we're going to have a spa day. We want to give you massages. We want to teach you about hydrotherapy. We want to do these things, and we want to cook you food. Oh, they would love it. After working all day, just have them come. Or show up to them with a massage table and say, all right, you're next. Come here. Here's where we're going to cook some food. All right, this is how we can leverage all of the skills that we have, medical missionary work, to reach people. This was in Africa. This one girl who started with one, she came, she couldn't see out of her eyes. It was like this fog. I've never seen anything like it. And I just was like, it almost looked like cataracts, but it wasn't cataracts. And it's been like that for 7 years. She's gone to the doctor over and over and over again. They couldn't figure it out. It was like just constantly her eyes were watering and itchy, and she was just constantly blinking like this all day. And I felt so bad for her. And we told her we all we can do, and this is what I truly believe with all of my heart about medical missionary work. Even if we don't know what the problem is and we don't know how to fix it, let's give it to God and let's use a natural remedy. Let's use charcoal. Let's use hot and cold. Even if we're not even sure if it'll work, it's not going to do any damage. Let's do it and let's leave the results to God. So we said, all we can do, let's pack her eyes with charcoal, and let's do hot and cold compresses. And we did it once, and we sent her home with charcoal. We said, pack this on her eyes tonight and wrap it, and in the morning do hot and cold compresses, and then come back and we'll look. She came back the next morning, and this time she had a friend that had the same problem. And the little girl that came, her eyes weren't watery, and she says, I can see. It's still kind of foggy, but my eyes aren't watering. And then for a week, we just did it on all of them. And pretty soon more people would come. And these girls were walking around just fine. And the mom was just blown away. She was like knowing that what we did was nothing. But every time we come in, she's like, and can we please pray? Right before we would start, like before we could even say we're going to pray, she's like, can we please pray? Because she recognized that this was the power of God. Right? So let's use our medical missionary talents for this. Let's leverage it. Here's that woman walking out of her tent. There she is again. You know, any type of medical missionary work. Literally, we would just walk around. The French actually gave us their whole warship. I actually got a phone call, and they said, we'd like to have you in command of our, first of all, it started out, would you please come down and check the depth of the dock? I was like, who is this? Well, this is Commander such and such of the French Navy. We're like, okay. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to check the depth of the dock. So I just grabbed my mask and snorkel, and I walked down there, and I'm like, I'm just going to, I guess, just jump in and swim? Like, I had no clue. And I'm standing there thinking about it, and up pops a diver. And I was like, whoa. I was like, hey, do you have can you get me the depth of the dock? He's like, oh yeah, I've already got it all written down. I work for some other group. And he gave me all the stuff, and I just copied it, pasted it, and sent it to the French commander. And he sent back, he said, wow, I've never received such a more detailed report. He said, I'd like to put you guys and only work with you. You guys are in command of my ship. Tell me what you want me to do. We showed up. He had supplies for the whole island that now we were in charge of. And the French commander, he's like, I want to send a medical team with you into the island, and you guys go door to door and check on people, see what's needed. And I led the medical crew around, and the medical crew, like, they were making fun of me because I'm handing out literature and praying with people. And by the end, one of them, he comes up to me, he says, I've never seen anything like this. He said, I truly see God on this island. He said the amount of destruction and the little loss of life, and to hear the people telling me that these stories of their little baby getting sucked out of their arms out the window, and all of a sudden she's able to grab her leg, or the house that everything around it is destroyed except the one house, and that the guy that lives in that house is a Seventh-day Adventist, you know, and he's just like, this is impossible. And it's like, well, and he's like, what I see in you, I want. And I gave him a great controversy. We gave the captain of the ship. I still am in contact with the captain of the ship, and he is still, I don't know that he's read it, but I really hope and pray that he does. But they sent us with the medical crew, you know, and we had no idea the depth of the dock, but we still went in faith, trusting that God would provide. That God would provide the lamb, like Abraham. We have to go with the little bit of light that we have, trusting that God will give us more as we go. And that's one thing we've learned, because God doesn't lay out, you know, you think about Paul and Silas in the prison cell, sitting there chained, shackled, blisters, singing. They didn't know the next verse, that there was going to be an earthquake. They had no clue. All right, we're the same way. We have these stories to look back on. We can have faith that God will do these, but we don't know. So we have to go in faith. You know, that's some of the hardest things, is going without a plan. You know, here's somebody foot into Africa. You know, it looks terrible, but charcoal and hot and cold. All right, best thing. All right, this is in Ukraine. This is somebody's leg. All right, this is in an airplane. Somebody had a medical emergency on the airplane, and totally low on glucose, blood sugar, passed out. We started an IV, and the whole everybody got literature on the plane. They're just like, this is amazing. Like, and this is where we met a friend. He came and he said, I see you guys are a rescue team headed to Turkey. My family's buried in the rubble. Would you mind? Would you come and help me? We said, absolutely. That's our contact, our Muslim contact that came with us, that came back to the United States, who's gone on multiple responses with us, and is now studying to become an Adventist. All right, his name is Oktay, and it's amazing. You know, and his family, they all died in the earthquake. Not his wife and his children, but his mother and uncles and brothers and all of them. Right? This was in Turkey, dig in. This was a little boy that was pulled from the rubble in Turkey. Our dogs found him, one of our teammates found him, and he was buried for 14 days with no food and no water. And when we pulled him out, do you know what he said? He said a man in white brought him food and water every day. And that story went viral all over Turkey. Boom. Right? You can't dispute this. And you can look at him. He doesn't look like he's been without food and water for 7 days. Or 14 days. Right? There's our friend in the Caribbean. This is a medic from the ship, the Navy ship. We're doing hot and cold there and on Union Island with our prayed for ice for that lady. who was just, we actually had a whole big church service, and so many people from the island came just from us going around doing medical missionary work. All our little medical missionary patients, we showed up with our moped and we shuttled them to church. Every single one of them. This man in Union Island, it was a medical emergency. He was having some problem with his heart. The doctor said, we have to get him. He's going to die. We have to get him. So the whole island was going crazy. The military, the private military contractors were all going crazy trying to find a helicopter, and nobody could find one. And our team in the hospital, that's where we were stationed, we just said, we want to gather everybody, and we're going to pray. We all prayed for a helicopter with the ex-Adventist doctor. And then I just felt impressed to call the ex-Adventist the ex-Adventist Samaritan's Purse guy. Called him, I said, hey, by any chance, do you have a helicopter? And he said, I'm on one right now. What do you need? And I said, well, we have a medical emergency at the hospital. Is there any way? He's like, I'm 10 minutes from you. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And I have a flight nurse on the helicopter with me, and we can fly him out. We rushed him down to the tarmac. The whole village gathered around, the whole town, everybody. And here comes this prayed for helicopter, lands, flies off with the guy, and the guy survives. And the whole island knew that these Americans had again prayed for a helicopter, and God answered the prayer. Now pretty soon, everybody's asking us, do you think we can pray for this? Can we pray for this? It's like, yes, let's pray. God could answer the prayer, right? Here's a little boy that we needed an ambulance for, and God sent an ambulance after we prayed for it. You know, this is he's from Israel, a food truck, and he provided all of the plant-based falafel stuff for Los Angeles. Hundreds and hundreds of meals for us for free to take to these first responders. And as we're talking with him, I pulled out an Amazing Facts magazine that says American Bible Prophecy. And I handed it to him before he left, and he looks at it, and he's like, man, he's like, for the past month, every morning, this exact topic has been on my mind. And he's like, I have so many questions. He said, what is your view on Israel and Bible prophecy? I said, it's totally wrong. I said, all of this stuff that's happening, the only fulfillment of prophecy that is doing is fulfilling Matthew 24. And he said, I agree. He said, nobody believes me. He said, when you study the Bible and you see what's actually happening, Jesus is coming back for all people. Like, yes, exactly. You know, so he had this whole, and he's like, America is not who they say they are. Like, yeah, it's true. Like, it's a lamb-like beast. And he's like, absolutely. All right, so every opportunity, this was here in Texas. I'm going to play this little video.
So this is what we call the tactical haystack. Not only is it food for your body, we have important messages going with this haystack. America, Bible. That's how we roll.
So this was the local church in Kerrville, Arkansas, or Texas. And we took these meals to the Secret Service, and they were so excited because they were setting up for Trump, and we showed up with all these things, and they gave us all this access and all these things. The whole airport gave us access to everything. We handed out all these meals, all this literature, and we had like 25 or 30 left over, and we drove, and we're like, well, what are we going to do with all of these? And we pulled in, and there's this whole like Texas Highway Patrol unit that's parked at this church. And we pulled in, we said, hey, would any one of you like some fresh plant-based meals? And the captain of the troop turned around, he said, you've got to be kidding. He said, we were just talking about how much we wanted some healthy food. And we were swarmed. Like it was like just ants, just whoosh, onto us for all these meals. Brown rice, spinach, tomatoes, and beans, right? And guacamole. And it's like we've learned over and over that if we really, truly use our health message and we leverage it, people want it. Nobody can live on candy bars and energy drinks and pizza, right? It's disgusting. But man, when you show up with something like this, it's the door to the heart, and they're just like, man, well, what else do you have? Well, we have a message. We have a book. Here's to pass the time. And they're like, great, this is exactly what we need. We've been sitting here for 12 hours. You know, in the disaster zone, what's interesting, a lot of the times the cell service is gone, so people are bored out of their mind. And if you give them a book, man, you just brightened their whole day, right? This is driving in LA right after we had passed out the meals to the inmate fire crew. Coming back out.
We've got that whole Cal Fire corrections fire. Thank you, guys.
All for the book, The Great Controversy. You know, like these people are hungry. This is a Black Hawk helicopter we prayed for. It's been countless times we've been like on our knees, Lord, we don't know what to do. How are we going to get into this? And this for that instance, when we stood up from praying in the airport, we got a phone call from the United States Army. And they said, we hear you're in Adana, Turkey, and we'd like to send 2 Black Hawk helicopters to take you the rest of the way. And we're like, well, that sounds great to us. You know, and this has happened countless times. You know, God will remove all stops. This is in Turkey with one of the little kids.
Tamam geldik. Geldik fıstığım geldik. Geldik canımın içi geldik.
You know, it was so sad. You know, you think about, but this little kid that comes out, and this was another one, but the little boy that he came out after this, you know, to tell all the first responders there that a man white brought in food and water every day. You know, everybody was just like, wow. You know, even sometimes God, along the way, God gives you the desires of your heart. You know, this was how I knew the gender of our baby, Elsie, before my wife did, and she asked me to surprise her, so I took this picture and sent it to her. And then here's just some little videos in Ukraine.
Я думаю, може
Some of these we've already seen. You know, this one we just walked up and said, "Are you going in?" And they said, "We said we'd like to give you some audio Bibles." And they said, "Well, will you take them? Will you come with us and give them to the soldiers there?" And we said, "Yes." So we piled in their armored personnel carrier and they drove us in. You know, it's like, we weren't really expecting that. You know, here's on top of that tank. Now, this is what it was like in Ukraine every day.
There's like battle going on right now.
You know, and there's at night.
Що вихід?
So you think about it, like that's like living through that just sounds totally crazy. Like, why would people be complacent and out shopping and doing those things? But like I said, you look at the broad picture, we're doing the same thing, you know, with the alarm system we have. There's the drone. So this was the picture I was kind of telling you guys about. right? So there's the guy that we met, and here's the guys that gave us directions down the road that was totally, that we should not have been on, right? Here's our little Pathfinder minivan. We drew the little Pathfinder symbol on the back in the mud, driving through places. This was in Israel. Same thing happened. We showed up at a checkpoint, and we knew we could not go further. We knew it was impossible. Nobody was allowed to go further. And we showed up, and we're like, we'll just drive to the checkpoint, and we'll give the people at the checkpoints audio Bibles and oranges. When we showed up, we gave them oranges and audio Bibles, and there's no way they thought we were somebody else, because we had a white car that said in red letters, Avis Rental, right? So we pulled up, and they said, well, where are you going? I said, I don't know, wherever there's people. They said, well, there's people down this road. And they opened the gate. I said, okay, and we drove. We drove for 30 miles, didn't see anybody. And we showed up at the next checkpoint. There was nobody there. We sat there, and finally a vehicle showed up. They said, you guys are not supposed to be on this road. And they took us to see the commanding officer, and he said, well, he was so excited for one to see Americans. And this was in Kadesh Barnea, which is kind of cool if anybody knows their Bible, where Kadesh Barnea is. So this was the town of Kadesh Barnea. And he was so excited that just Americans were there that he totally forgot that we'd driven down that road. And he said, so where did you guys come from? And we're like, oh, we came from here. He's like, oh, so you came this way? No, I said, no, we drove down this way. And he said, no, you didn't. I said, yeah, we did. And I showed him pictures, because we had a guy with us that wanted to film. And never take a guy that likes to take pictures on a trip, because he's like, stop. And we stop, and he'd be like, shh. Okay, you can go, wait, stop. And it's like, no, we got to keep moving. This is not a good place to stop and take pictures. But we were like stopping, backing up for this guy. So we had lots of proof that we had been on this road. We showed the commander, and he was just like, wow. He said, I'm not even allowed on this road. The only people that are allowed on this road are special government permission, and they have to have air support to go with them. He said, you need to go talk to the people that are in charge of the security of this road and tell them this story. We're like, okay. So we drive up, and it turns out it's these girls that are in charge of this. And they have a big 7-foot drone in the sky all the time. They have this whole room set up with all these cameras. We drove by on this road. We drove by cameras. I'm like, man, we are being watched. This is not smart, right? Israel is a very secure country. The IDF are very secure, except for October 7th. But we talked to them, and we gave them all steps to Christ. We celebrated the first evening or night of Hanukkah with them. They were all excited to sing and show us their little tradition. And just when we were getting ready to leave, I just was like, I really wanted to know why we drove down that road without anybody seeing us. And I asked the commander, I said, did you guys see us drive down this road? And she's like, what road? I said, this one. And you can see it. You can see the fence out in the background, way out there. And one side is Egypt and one side is Israel. She said, nobody's been down that road all day. We said, no, we drove down that road with our little white car. She said, no, you didn't. I said, yeah. And I showed her the picture. And she's like, she took my phone, she looked at it, she scrolled in on the timestamp, and she like goes to her computer. She pulls up the security cameras, and she's like looking, and she's like, and she looks at it, and she's like, you're not here. She's like, your car should be right here on this camera, according to your picture, and according to this, and it's not there. And I said, well, we were there. And then she says, can you tell me why you're here again? And we told her. And then she started making some phone calls. And then she's like, I can't believe you're here. And then the whole group, we all of a sudden now everything we said had weight to it. They're just like, why are you here? We told them the message, and they're just like, this is super important. And then we left. We were told we'd never make it into Israel, let alone hand out anything. And yet we handed out so much literature. I was actually I called a ministry, and I said, would you please send us great controversies? We're going to Israel. They said, we're not going to send you any because you won't get them in. And we took in everything we got and handed out everything we got. Where is the faith in our church to say, where there's a cause, we'll send people. Where there's opportunity, let's send books. All right, that's what we need. Here's just a little snippet of air support that we have prayed for and God has sent. It's countless. And this is just a couple. There was one time I was coming back from Ukraine. Carrie had called me crying, and she's like, "You have to come home now." I said, "Well, I'm coming home in 2 days. Can I come home in 2 days?" She said, "No, you have to come home now." I said, "Well, I don't know how I'm going to get home. Like, I can't afford a ticket to change the ticket, but I'll go to the airport." So I went to the airport. My ticket was with some other company, and I went to Lufthansa desk, and I said, "I'm trying to find my booking counter for this." And they said, "What's your flight?" They type it up, and they said, "Oh, we see that your flight today has been canceled, so we'll put you on the next available flight." And I said, No. My flight is in 2 days. And I showed them my email, and they said, well, they looked at my name, and they turned their computer around, and it says I had a flight that was today that was canceled with Lufthansa. And I was like, no, I'm with United or whatever. And they said, well, we'll put you on the next available flight. They booked me on the flight, and I left. And the Brock actually got a text while I was there saying that my flight had just been canceled. And he called me. He said, "Did you get a flight?" I said, "Well, I don't know what happened, but somehow I got a flight booked now in the future." It's so confusing. And he said, "Well, I just got a text that said that your flight had been canceled for today." And he's like, "You don't have a flight today." It's like, I know. So I get on the flight, and I get home, and I have a layover in Chicago, and I'm sitting there, and this Catholic priest comes and sits next to me. And I'm just like, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to say. And he looks at me, he's like, "Are you a soldier?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you a missionary?" I said, "Yes." He said, what church?" I was like, oh, okay. I said, "A Seventh-day Adventist." And he's like, "No way." He's like, "I have so many questions for you." He's like, starts going in. He's like, "What about this? What about this? What about the Sabbath? What about the state of the dead? What about the mark of the beast?" All this stuff. And we talk about it. We go through the Bible. And then he's like, and then all of a sudden he just turned super pale, and he just looked at me, and he said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "I can't believe it myself." And he's like, "Yesterday, before I left on this trip, my family and I have been struggling with these questions. And we prayed, all of us, yesterday, that if this truly was important to God, that he would send us someone today to answer these questions." And he said, "You're sitting here next to me telling me this." He's like, "I've got to call my wife and family." It's like 4 a.m. And he calls his wife, wakes her up, tells her the whole thing, and they're all laughing and crying. He calls his mom, she's crying, he's crying, and he's like, "I cannot believe that this happened." And I said, "Well, I'm not even supposed to be here today. I'm supposed to be flying home in 2 days. But somehow, God used my wife, brought a trial upon her where she was like, 'I need you to come home now,' called me, go to Lufthansa, booked a ticket in the future, canceled it, and then booked another ticket out of nowhere to put me there on that day." Right? And that's what I'm saying. If we would let the Holy Spirit lead, and we would act with the little bit of light that we have, and we would go wherever he says to go and leverage every opportunity, God will move mountains. Right? There's another aircraft. And there's the captain of the Navy ship. Super excited that we're there. If you guys want, there's my phone number. And you guys can text me anything. And then also, if you ever want to be a part of a Gideon Rescue response, this is the QR code where we post if we're going on a mission. You have to have the app Telegram, but once you have the app, you can join the group, Gideon Rescue Company. And if we're going to Texas, we'll post we're going to Texas. Anybody that wants to come can come. Or we're going to Burma for a mission. We're going here. So this is, and if your church was like, I want to do a training in disaster evangelism, we'll come and we'll put on like a basic medical first aid class, and we'll do like a basic swift water class of how to operate in a flood zone, and chainsaw stuff and this type of thing, and how to talk and present yourself to like a emergency personnel, military, and how to bring the gospel into it. So if you guys want to be a part of that, I'd love to come back and do that. So there's so much opportunity, and I truly believe that now's the time that we should be acting on this and jumping on with our tactical advantage. So yeah, we'll close with prayer, and then if anybody has any questions, like I was gonna leave it open if people want to ask questions or anything. So, dear Lord, we thank you so much that your Holy Spirit is being poured out on your people. Lord, and it's so encouraging to see that truly 7,000 have not bowed the knee. And to see your faithful people, your faithful churches all around the country and the world that are following through with the message that you have given us. The health message and the three angels message, Lord, all of it. And we ask that you help us if there's anyone here that wants to be a part of Gideon Rescue Company or to start up their own here at the church, just to follow the same principles of disaster evangelism, Lord, that we, if we can help in any way, Lord, help us. Help us to do it. And be with everyone here and open up our hearts to you and to the wooing of your Holy Spirit. And if there's anything in our lives that we need to cut out or change, surrender to you, Lord, help us to do so, to trim our lamps so that we can shine brighter for you. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't want to keep anybody, but